It's August, which means it's also Breastfeeding Awareness Month. You're a brand new mom or dad, and you decided to take the plunge into breastfeeding your newborn. You have questions like, what if I can't latch? Is formula still okay to give? Is it really that important to breastfeed? In this episode of the JAFERD cast, we're talking about breastfeeding, the social stigma surrounding it, the science behind it, and just exactly how family and social media shames moms everywhere for not doing enough, doing too much, or not doing it the way they did it. Buckle up, let's get going. Welcome everyone to this episode of the JAFERD cast. I am your host, Dr. Mark Papadakis. No one particularly special, just another freaking ER doctor. This week is actually going to be Breastfeeding Awareness Week, well, more specifically, Breastfeeding Awareness Month. So to kick things off, we decided to bring in Dr. Maggie Gaughran again to talk to us about breastfeeding. Everything and all things breastfeeding. If you enjoyed the content, please be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast apps as well as on YouTube. Find us on social media as well, as I regularly post clips and episodes and generally spam the ever-living daylights out of my followers with medical nonsense. All right, without further ado, let's bring her in. All right, I'm here with Dr. Maggie Gaughran. Maggie, hello again.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Very, very good. All right, so we're talking about breastfeeding this time around. And, you know, you're a mom, I'm a dad. We've all kind of been through the breastfeeding route, but there's a lot of still questions, stigma associated with breastfeeding, even though for the past, I feel like 10 years, it's been pretty much well known that there's been a huge push to breastfeeding over the past 10 years. Way more so than, I think, our parents' generation, because I was a formula-fed baby. You know, I don't know what about you?
Yep, same. I think my mom breastfed for, a month or so and then switched over.
Okay. So what is it about breastfeeding now that we're pushing for new moms to really do? Is there a reason compared to our parents' generation? Is it research data? Like, what is it?
I'm going to preface all this by saying that our country is very good at making parents feel bad, right? So no matter what we do, It's going to be the wrong thing, right? And the guilt, the parental guilt, the mom guilt is pretty strong. So breastfeeding is kind of this charged topic, right? Because there are benefits to it, but it's also very hard and not well supported in our society, like you were saying. So, talk about the benefits of it. You can't ignore it, right? There is science. It is beneficial to breastfeed for both mom and baby. So as you were asking, we now know that breastfeeding for mom can reduce risks of ovarian and breast cancer. Those cancers, the longer we breastfeed, the more the risk goes down,
And how does that work? Do we know what correlation is there between the two?
Yes, someone smarter than me probably has a better understanding of it. Obviously hormonal, obviously, there is an estrogen component to this. Similarly, how women who have children or who have been pregnant lower their risk compared to women who have never had children. And so the hormonal changes that happen in women during breastfeeding are going to lower that risk for the ovarian and the breast cancer in the future for them. But I can't tell you what
it's interesting
full data on it.
Yeah, it's fine. It's interesting because we also think about breastfeeding being beneficial to the baby, but rarely do we think about beneficial to the mother too.
Yes, so I like to bring that one up first.
It's actually very good to know.
Yeah, because it isn't, obviously the babies are my domain. And so I could talk to that, but I think it is important to say that there is also a benefit for mom, right? Because the majority of motherhood is focused on the baby and must do everything to protect child, right?
Well, and plus also you bring the baby over to your relatives and everybody wants to see, oh, how's the baby doing? How's the baby doing? How you doing? Okay, fine. How's the baby doing? It's even after, pregnancy and all that,
mom is always second. So yes. I want to put that up in the front and just say off the bat, there is benefits to mom for breastfeeding. So we got that going.
And clearly from the biggest benefit that we've talked about and seen recently for breastfeeding is always the immune component for the baby.
There we go. Yeah, exactly.
The idea that, okay, you're getting antibodies from mom, passing on to the baby. There's this passive immunity that, helps a child basically weather a lot of different viruses and infections that formula-fed babies are not at risk for. Going to completely immunize them, but it's also they're just a little bit more protected compared to your children who are on formula feeds and things of that sort.
Yeah, exactly. So, what I'll tell to parents is that, all babies are going to have some immune protection, right, from mom, from having been inside mom, right? And some of that immune protection is going to last in the first few months of their life. And then when you're breastfeeding, you're giving additional protection on top of that, especially when you have these babies born in like the respiratory season, which we both know is now all seasons, all the time,
season
right?
long. It's all year long. That's
so
it.
It's like it's never ends anymore, and we can't predict very well, where we used to be like, oh, it's October, we're going to see this, so now everything is all the time, so that extra added protection through breast milk, as mom is making antibodies and giving breast milk to baby, and baby is getting that extra protection. But if you had a baby, you gave it some protection.
Yes.
Right? Whether or not you continue with the breastfeeding.
And that's the thing. At the end of the day, your antibodies, if you're a mom and you're carrying the baby, are passing into the baby in utero, in the placenta. So you have, and that lasts for what? I think it's like 4 months, 6 months?
Yeah, 4 or 6 months, we think. Yeah, it starts to wane around there.
And that's one of the reasons why, believe it or not, you're getting the vaccines timed more around the 4 to 6 month mark, because that's when the immunity starts to wane away compared to what you had with the mom. Now, obviously, the breastfeeding kicks it a little bit longer down the line. But I think that's also reassuring for parents who can't breastfeed, because there's a stigma that if you're not breastfeeding your baby right now, you're doing it wrong. And it's very stressful, like you mentioned, to mom to say, well, I can't breastfeed for whatever reason. I think, and we're going to go into a little bit of that, but no, the answer is you're not doing anything wrong if you can't breastfeed your baby. If you choose not to, that's your choice. But let's have an informed discussion about choice here if you can. If you can breastfeed your baby, obviously that's way more ideal just for the immune component alone.
Exactly. And I think, there is in parenting a lot of this like black and white thinking of like, if I can't do this thing perfect, then I'm screwing up my child, right? I have to do everything like it perfectly. And that's just not the reality, as we both know as
social media is
parents.
telling me I'm screwing up my child by doing like one thing or another. So
no matter what you do, you're screwing up your kid. It doesn't matter how much you know or how much you read. Everybody's going to tell you something that you're messing up your kid. So I like to remind parents that like there is an in between. If first of all, it's so important to me that the parents have this discussion, and do they want to breastfeed? I see newborns in the hospital as part of my job, and there's a big push for baby-friendly hospitals and breastfeeding, right after birth and all of that, which is wonderful, right? It's good for mom, it's good for baby. I sometimes come into a room and like mom knows right off the bat she does not want to breastfeed for whatever reason. She does not want to, she can't, whatever. So, being sort of aware that that's a thing, and not walking into the room and saying, how is breastfeeding going, right? But talking about what are your plans for feeding?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. What's bringing some kind of awareness, starting the conversation in a very neutral tone, and then letting the patient guide from there.
Exactly. That's
the main thing.
Mom might say right off the bat, I want to try to breastfeed, but I also want to do formula. Okay, great. Mom might say, I want to breastfeed and only breastfeed. I don't want bottles. I only want direct breastfeeding. Okay, great. Mom might say, I have zero interest in breastfeeding. I just want formula. Okay, great. So yes, we know that there are these benefits, but it is definitely sort of a polarizing thing in medicine, in pediatrics, in breastfeeding medicine, lactation consultants, all these different components that, there is a middle ground.
There is. And it's what really we always say, and I try to reinforce this, a fed baby is a happy baby. As long as you're feeding your baby, you're doing something right. It doesn't matter what. So the issue that my wife and I had was the initial latch was a bit of a problem for my wife. And she ended up using a nipple guard. And if you don't know what this is, it's basically like a nipple that attaches onto the breast around the areola. And it kind of helps bring the nipple forward a little bit to enable and help the baby start to really latch and suckle and all that. And she used it for really until her milk came in. She probably used it for maybe 5-6 days or so. And then she had her follow-up with the OB, and the OB noticed, hey, you still look like you haven't really done a lot of breastfeeding. That's how much nipple guards protect the nipples. Yeah. All of a sudden the nipple guards came off, and all of a sudden my wife is like, oh, ow, this is really what it feels like,
Yeah.
But it was, the idea that her goal was, I want to be able to breastfeed, exclusively breastfeed, until, our daughter is 1 year old. And thankfully, she did ultimately obtain that goal. Barely, we feel like, she was not somebody who was an overproducer. She wasn't really an underproducer. She produced just the right amount. So to that end, pumping was actually a challenge. for us. And that meant that I and relatives had very limited access to actually feed our child with, outside the confines of just my wife breastfeeding her. So everybody's going to have challenges. And I think it's also understanding for people to know that just because you're having one particular challenge doesn't mean you can't overcome it. If you're frustrated, other people have challenges too. Other people have these frustrations. And ideally, you want a support system that can help you go through that, but not everybody does either. It's tough.
Exactly. And I think that's a really important thing, right? Breastfeeding is really hard, physically difficult, mentally, emotionally, totally exhausting, right? I'll share, for myself, my daughter, we had a crash section under general anesthesia. So
oh boy,
not as expected, right? It was not the beautiful childbirth that I've seen a million times in my job, but it was fine, and we both made it out fine. But because of that, I was asleep under anesthesia for like hours really after she was born. And so you'll hear a lot of people talk about this, like the golden hour, skin to skin in that first hour after delivery can help with milk production. And if that is a possibility, that is a wonderful thing to do, right? I got to experience that with my second child. It's great. My first child, we did not have that, right? Like we were separated. My poor husband's like holding her. I don't know what to do, right? And I was totally out of it for several hours.
You're like, I'm out.
Yeah, I didn't know what happened. So the start of our breastfeeding was really tough, similar to how you're talking about. And we did everything. We did the nipple guards. We were, hand expressing in the hospital. As a pediatrician, was focused on, I want to exclusively breastfeed, because like in my science brain, I was saying that's what I needed to do. But in my hormonal postpartum brain, it was like, I couldn't remember that there was this middle ground. And so those first few weeks of trying to breastfeed exclusively were really tough, right? And they were tough because breastfeeding's hard and because our delivery was hard, right?
Now, did you have a support system that kind of reminded you, hey, there's a middle ground here. You don't have to do this. You have to do that. Like, how did those two brains of yours tend to intertwine after a while?
Not well. Mm-hmm. So my husband was like so supportive. He's like, whatever you want to do, you want to breastfeed exclusively, fine. You want to formula feed exclusively, fine. Like, yes, he's non-medical. And so he trusted my judgment in terms of like, saying that there was this benefit for breastfeeding, but he also was like, you're making yourself crazy over this. Like, is there something else we could do?
Yes.
And I really, like a lot of moms, was just like so fixated on it. And it really took away from some of that, like what could have been a nice postpartum experience and breastfeeding journey. And we did it, we got through it. But like for me in that scenario, the first time around, like it was not enjoyable. And I felt like a lot of it was this pressure I was putting on myself to have this perfect breastfeeding relationship that was all or nothing,
Doubly so, because you're also, like you said, in the medical field, you're a pediatrician, what's the benefits there, what can be at stake, that developmentally is good for your child. So you especially have this extra push in your brain to say, I need to do this.
Right.
And that's something that not many women know about unless they're in the medical field. They hear peripherally, they hear from their doctor, it's cultural, whatever. So that's tough. Thank you for sharing that story too. I didn't even know that.
And I think, especially coming out, my daughter was born in 2021, right? I got my first COVID vaccine while I was pregnant with her in the first trimester, when we were kind of like, we don't know what this is going to be, but we think it's going to be fine, and having, worked through COVID, it was like, I knew that was something I had to do. But after she was born, wanting to keep her protected, right? Especially I was going back to work, I was going to be exposed, wanting to keep that going. That was really important to me.
Now, so I guess how does, and I don't know if you know this, but how does drinking breast milk, it goes into your stomach, how does that protect you from a respiratory virus, right? Because you're intaking the milk, it goes in your stomach, and you have these antibodies that are in your stomach, and you're assuming that it's kind of like diffuses like pixie dust in your body, right? But then a virus comes in, it doesn't come in through your mouth or your gut, it goes in by your nose. So how does that from your stomach go to here? Like, how does that protection even work?
I'm having like flashbacks, immunology flashbacks, and like,
that's right. That's all the
little
painful
drawings
flashbacks
of the I could draw what they look like, but I could not explain that to you.
Because I remember talking to our pediatrician about that, about how is my wife feeding her breast milk going to protect her from like all the viruses? And his response, he's a little bit of an older school doc, was like, for the most part, yes, but it's really going to protect you more from your rotavirus, the GI virus, because that's going to really hit your gut, lymph nodes and things first. And then the respiratory viruses, the ear infections, there's some, peripheral stuff, but it's going to help more of the gut than anything else. I'm like, well, then what are we telling our patients here? If we're saying that breastfeeding is like a whole 100% complete immune response, is it really? And I looked into it, and the answer is yes. Ultimately, those enzymes, those, the IgA, the IgG, all that stuff we learned in immunology, oh man, it's like painful. It ultimately doesn't get broken down in stomach acid. It gets absorbed, and it does go across all your different lymphatic tissue, all your lymph nodes and, mucous membranes and all that kind of stuff, and does provide protection that way. So there is that kind of
some pixie dust.
There is some pixie dust going on there. It's all pixie dust.
Yes. And, I think that's an important thing also is like, it does not mean that your child's not going to get sick, because they are going to get sick, whether you do it in the perfect all breast milk, never touched a drop of formula. They're still likely going to get sick, right? But giving them breast milk, giving some of this passive immunity allows that maybe they won't get as sick, right? They'll have some immune protection versus being like a clean slate.
Right. And that's the thing with, including in the infant vaccines and things like that, it's maximizing their chance to not get as sick and not need to go to the hospital. You're going to be miserable for a couple of days with a cranky baby, fever, ear infections, whatever, but it will ultimately get better a lot sooner. It won't be nearly as cranky. Now, did your hospital offer some kind of lactation support group? Did you go to that in the beginning? How did that, did you even take part in any of these extra things?
There definitely was a lactation support group, and I didn't go. My insurance had like lactation consultant that was like included in my insurance that I was able to use, and in both pregnancies I did do that. And the first time we were struggling so hard, and the lactation consultant was great, but she also was just like, okay, keep going, keep struggling.
Yeah, keep going. Do your thing.
Just
Good
keep
job.
doing it, And I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're dying here. But yes, there was support. And like you said, I think support makes a huge difference, right? Even talking about, like you had in the beginning, our parents' generation was like, give formula, right? And so a lot of times people in our generation are hearing that from the grandparent, like, why aren't you giving formula? We gave formula.
What's wrong with formula?
Exactly.
And I think there's also a component of you're saying that I did something wrong to you. And we're not saying that. It's like, no. Times change, studies change, mentalities change. What you did was perfectly fine. It's just we found out this is more ideal. So here's what we want to do here. But I think some of that is also, well, give formula because that's what I did for you or we did for you. So therefore, why are you doing this different thing? Are you saying it wasn't good enough? No.
Exactly. Yeah, right. There's a lot of feelings, a lot of intergenerational trauma that is going on around breastfeeding. But, all over the world, in all different species, there is milk breastfeeding, happening. And I think obviously as humans, we get a lot of like emotional turmoil into it. And so that can kind of make it a little more complicated. But, there are a million reasons to give formula and it's fine.
Yes. And
I think
that's the thing.
The bottom line is like,
yes.
It's okay.
Yeah,
okay.
And ultimately, we go back to a fed baby is a happy baby. As long as you're feeding your baby, you're doing something right. That's fed. That's all you really did. That is literally step number one. Feed your baby. Step number two is how do you feed that baby? But as long as your baby is being fed and they're growing, hey, perfect.
Yeah. And I really love that you're using like fed baby as a happy baby, because a lot of times, especially in these like online parents groups and stuff, sometimes you'll hear this fed
that's
is
even
best.
Worse than,
right.
Oh, man.
And like fed is best. It's like, okay, like we're not just, no, like fed baby is a happy baby is the perfect way to say it, right? And it is important to me that mom is okay, because if mom is not okay, baby's not going to be okay, right?
And daddy's not
So
happy okay either. Okay, let's be
exactly,
honest.
you
If
guys are
mom
there
is not
too. Yeah,
okay, nobody's
nobody's
happy.
happy. Yeah. So,
Now, is there, so you know, my daughter, very much attached to her mom.
yeah,
Definitely not a daddy's girl yet. We'll see, maybe when she's
yeah.
older. And she's obviously exclusively breastfed. Is there a component where you talk about skin to skin? You talk about the connection between mom and baby that is now lost between the baby and their father or their other parent, male or female, because the baby spends so much time with mom at the breastfeeding?
Yeah, so I think that there is definitely a special bonding that happens with
Is a bond
breastfeeding.
at the expense of the
Right.
other parent?
Yeah,
That's
so
kind of the question, I
that's a
think.
tough question, because I think there is a lot of time of the day when baby is not feeding. And so the other parent can, a lot of times, the other parent can be the one doing that other stuff, right? Like my husband did diaper changes because I was the feeding one. So like any diaper changes, any getting up in the middle of the night to get the baby, to bring the baby to me when I was breastfeeding, right? We tried to share that goal. And I don't think that always happens in a situation where there are two parents there and involved. I think sometimes the breastfeeding parent is also doing the diaper changing, is also doing the holding and comforting, right? So the
Mhm.
feeding is one thing, but there's all this other stuff that can be done.
Right.
But yes,
And it's
obviously that
tough.
first hour of skin to skin and being held and comforted hours a day while feeding, like that is gonna there is gonna be a special bond there. But I don't know that there's any evidence that that lasts, right? In terms of
My
like
daughter, I mean,
years and years.
my daughter may just like her mom because she doesn't yell as much. I don't know.
Yeah,
There's other
exactly.
things
You
involved
never
here.
know. Yeah, yeah. And I think those kind of things, like parental preference, like changes so much as kids get older. Like I see it, my daughter's gonna be 4, and it's like, some days I am the queen, she's like
Hmm.
everything mommy, and other days it's like, no, mommy, I don't like you, I don't want you, I want
Yep.
only daddy. And so, I don't know that in the long term there's any um like lasting benefit or risk or that.
Yeah, and I think it's come up for our discussion sometimes between me and my wife because our daughter at night prefers mom. Mom has always put her to bed. I've done it when mom is not in the house. Like
Yeah.
she can't even be in the house. If the daughter knows she's in the house, it's done. I want mommy. And so that was very much the issue for many, many months, even till now in a way. And a lot of that just stems from the nighttime routine of she
Sure.
breastfed her to
Feeding.
put her
Yeah.
down. So in her mind, that was the routine. Even as early as 4 or 5 months, she recognized this. And now we have a situation where, okay, mom is no longer breastfeeding here, but it's still that preference for mom, especially at nighttime, to go in and comfort, to put down. And it can be frustrating for dads and other parents, grandparents especially too. But at the same time, it's also temporary. And I
Yeah,
think that needs
yeah.
to be said to the other parents
Absolutely.
out there who are struggling with issues relating to comfort and other routines that revolve around breastfeeding, that ultimately this is still temporary. There are things that are going to happen that you can be a part of too, that if you really want to be a part of their nighttime routine, stay in the room with mom when she's
Yes.
doing all this.
Yeah, that's what
I
I was
mean,
gonna
you're,
say. I was, with my daughter, we are very big on like telling her like it's okay that you're upset, but we're still doing it this way, right? So like
yes, yes,
if like this morning, because I'm here on the podcast, my husband took my kids out to go adventure to get them out so you don't hear them screaming.
nice.
And as they were getting ready, my daughter was like, no, I don't want daddy, I don't want to, today was mommy day, I guess,
Mhm.
and I said, oh, I hear you, but you're going with daddy and I'm staying
Yeah,
here, okay, bye,
yeah,
and she was crying and really upset. And for some parents that's really difficult, right? And it's a visceral reaction to, I don't want my child to be upset, but it's okay
yes,
if they're a little
yeah.
upset.
Yeah, and it's tough for me because I look at my daughter and
Yeah.
she's crying her eyes out, not like fake tears or anything, but actually legit
Yeah.
crying. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, this is really tough.
Yeah, like you're a
But
monster. How like
yeah,
but you
but
know
this is
what?
also
Like
part of being a parent too. That's
absolutely. And
the point.
it's so tough. And going back to the breastfeeding relationship, I mean, there were times in the breastfeeding that like my kids are like clawing at my face, like they don't want to be near me. They're like screaming their head off, and I'm like, you have to eat.
Mm.
They're congested or they don't feel good or something,
Yeah.
is going on, and they don't want to eat and they don't want me to hold them. And this like rejection as a parent can really have an effect on you. But I think it's important to just keep being there. So like as the non-breastfeeding parent, like doing as much of the other things as you can,
I
not
agree.
giving
And
in.
not giving in. Exactly. And we talk about there's a lot of social media out there on gentle parenting.
Yeah.
And it's almost like there's two camps. There's your, well, we didn't gentle parent you, we were parents. That's again the older generation, but it's the same mentality of, for them, gentle parenting is permissive parenting. And the answer is no, gentle parenting is not permissive parenting. Gentle parenting is explaining calmly, this is what we're doing, here's why, maybe, or just, no, I'm sorry,
That's
but
it.
this is
Yeah.
what we're doing,
Yeah.
and you're going to go do it. You're not screaming or anything like
Exactly.
that. You're not whack across the head anymore, obviously.
Right.
And I
Exactly.
think
And
there is that middle ground there.
there is, again, there is so much in this age of social media where people are able to share their thoughts on things. There are sometimes they are an expert and sometimes they are not, right? And so you're getting all of this information all the time. And I can remember like breastfeeding my baby and like being on my phone looking up like, am I doing this stuff right? And
Mhm.
like I'm a pediatrician, and breastfeeding is a very natural thing. There's not a right and wrong. I'm doing it. A baby's eating and they're growing. Okay, I'm doing it right. They're not feeding and growing. Okay, well then we need to figure out what's going on and do something different, right? Like it's
Right.
not a perfect thing. And I think that's really hard for a lot of parents because they want it to be perfect, right? You have this idea in your head of what it's going to be like, and then reality happens and it's just it bursts the bubble of what the
And
internet showed
yes,
you it was going to look like.
that's exactly, yeah. The internet, social media showed you what perfection is like, and so therefore that's what I want. And the response to that I have is, it is not perfect. That is staged, and that is bullshit. Like,
Absolutely.
I guarantee you, whatever video you saw, whatever reel or whatever you saw of mommy doing the perfect breastfeeding, the kid in their high chair, like eating their whatever with
Right.
a spoon, you didn't see the 20 takes beforehand to get that perfect shot. You didn't see the, sometimes maybe even the harsh structure that it got to that point.
Yes.
So don't put yourself into their shoes and say, oh, I need to do this, I need to be like that. No, 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 no. This is social media engineering you to think that way, but you need to resist that. Really
Yes.
tough. It's really
Absolutely.
tough.
It's so tough. Like I know better. I know I've seen a thousand of these mom and baby breastfeeding dyads, and I know that everything is different and everybody looks different. And yet there I was in the middle of the night being like, why am I not doing this well enough? What's wrong that I have to bottle feed or give formula, or I'm not making it to a year, or pumping isn't making enough. Like there's so much pressure. And despite all of the amazing benefits of breastfeeding, there is a middle ground, And
And I also want to shill a little bit, if you do have a hospital that does have a lactation group, having that shared experience with other moms that are in the room with you and present, that you can discuss like what you're doing, what's difficult for you, can do a lot for your mental health. It can reassure you that, oh, I am not the only one struggling here. Well, this person is having this problem. Oh, here, I can help you because I had that same issue. I mean, my wife went to these groups for months, and then she saw new moms come in. And then, she eventually became the more experienced mom of the group, where she can kind of help them go say, oh, here's what I did. Or, oh yeah, I couldn't do that either. And in the age of, postpartum depression, with, they call the baby blues, not even postpartum depression, just even baby blues. Hearing those experiences can really help the mother get out of those blues and really
absolutely.
reinforce that what I'm
Absolutely.
doing is right and this is normal.
Yes. And on my experience breastfeeding my second child, completely different. I am still me. I was still doing it the same. I had the same boobs. We were like, I don't know why it was different, right? But different experience, different child. It was so much easier. Was it because I had done it the first time? Was it because I put way less pressure on myself? Was it just a totally different diet and totally different experience? I don't know. But it doesn't mean that I was now the perfect breastfeeding mother, right?
Right.
Like,
right.
some of
You're not
it's
going to go on
luck.
speaking tours here. You're not going to
Right,
go on engaging
exactly.
tours and
I'm
say,
like, I
look
don't
at
know why
me.
this was so much better. I was probably trying less hard than I tried the first time, but there's just so much pressure that we put on parents. And of course, I think it's great if you can breastfeed your child, right? Of course, as a pediatrician, I think it's important. But I also see the moms who are just dying inside because they so badly want this and they're not able to do it, and they think it's hurting their child if they can't do it because that's what, Tabitha on social media told them. And
Right.
I don't support that, I won't.
Yes. Yeah. At the end of the day, as long as you're feeding your child, you're doing everything right. Is breastfeeding ideal? Yes. Is it the end all be all? No. So you're going to have so much more pressure as a new mom, as a second time, as a fifth time mom, that you don't need the added weight of, I need to make sure I am doing everything by the book, because you won't. You're going to screw it up, and that's fine.
You will. Even deal a lot with, like, parents do end up supplementing with formula, right? And then they're so stressed about what type of formula they're going to do. And obviously there are some babies who need like separate and special things, but a lot of babies don't. And I'm always the person that's get whatever is on sale.
Yeah.
Get the
Yes.
store brand, because there's just all of this is tied up with a lot of emotional and hormonal stuff of, targeting parents to want to do whatever is the best thing for their kid, even if it's at the expense of themselves, even if it's, setting money on fire because they wanted the like most perfect formula alternative or whatever. And these things just don't exist, it's
they don't exist. And then at the end of the day, remember, this is such a brief moment in the life that there's so much other things to worry about, so many other things to focus on, that this is not something that should lead to so much stress and anxiety.
Even though
especially because, and it does, and especially because it's also a time when, I know it's contradictory, but as a mother, you also have to focus a little bit on yourself too, and self-care is extremely important at this stage.
Definitely. And then, in our society, maternity leave is trash, right? So we're like, hey, you need to breastfeed for a year, but we're only going to give you 12 weeks off. Plus they're unpaid. And,
and by the way, here's a pump that you're going to have to go into some
now you're
small dark
room
that was a janitor's closet.
Right. But we're not going to give you a space to do it. And we're not going to give you time off to do it. And you're starving all day. And did you drink water? Like it's a lot,
How's the baby doing? Can I see pictures of the baby?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dr. Maggie Gaughran, thank you so much for coming on. This was a very important episode. Breastfeeding Awareness Month, obviously a source of anxiety, a source of stress for a number of people. But I think it's important to if you're a new mom, first time mom, second, whatever, repeat in your head, a fed baby is a happy baby. Just say it like twice.
Yes, you're doing great. You're doing great, Mom. You're doing great.
As you're trying to like get the right latch, and they're
right, exactly. They're hanging over, but you're doing great, right?
So, well, Maggie, thank you again for coming on. Hopefully, we can do a little bit more in the future.
Definitely.
And I guess we'll see you next time for sure.
See ya.
All right, that wraps up another episode of the JAFERD Cast. Thanks again to Dr. Maggie Gaughran for joining me. We talked about breastfeeding, we talked about the challenges, the benefits, and again, fed baby's a happy baby. Say that to yourself multiple times in a day. If you're a new mom, find a support group. Find people who are struggling, find people who have done it successful, and then share your experiences. It helps yourself, it helps other women, and just advocate for yourself and your baby whenever you also reach out to either your pediatrician, a lactation specialist, all of these people. As always, encourage constructive thoughts, comments, and suggestions. You can leave them in the comment section for those on YouTube, or email them to me at jaferdcast@gmail.com. If you're in the healthcare field and interested in being on the show to discuss topics in healthcare, or if you have a passing interest in healthcare topics, please feel free to reach out to me as well. Like with anything though, please don't take my word for it. Do your own research, talk to your own doctor, because at the end of the day, like I keep getting reminded of at work multiple times a day, I'm just another freaking ER doctor. Make a choice, everybody. We'll see you next time.